Greg Winters stared out the curved window of orbital platform Delta. Earth hung below, a twisted shadow of its former self. Once blue and green, now mostly brown and gray. Radiation zones covered much of North America. Toxic wastelands spread across what used to be Europe. The war and the disasters that followed had taken almost everything. Only about 500,000 humans remained alive. Most lived on 12 space stations circling Earth. A small group lived in domes on Mars. Greg often wondered if they would be the last generation of humans to exist. Greg worked as a xenobiologist, though his job had been mostly theoretical until now. He studied the possibility of alien life. For 43 years he had lived without seeing proof of aliens. That changed today. The message had arrived 6 hours ago. At first, the communication team thought it was a joke or an error, but after checking and rechecking, they confirmed it came from beyond our solar system. The message was in perfect English, which made everyone nervous. "Dr. Winters," said the computer voice. "You have a priority call from Director Peterson." Greg tapped his wrist screen. "This is Winters." "Greg, we need you in conference room A immediately," said Director Peterson. Her voice sounded tight with stress. "Our visitors will be arriving in 30 minutes. Visitors. The word made Greg's heart beat faster. After all these years of searching the stars, they had found us instead. "I'll be right there," he said. The main conference room on Delta was already crowded when Greg arrived. Military officers in their blue uniforms stood along one wall. Scientists and government officials filled the seats around the large table. Greg spotted Dr. Allison Porter, the station's top physicist, and gave her a small wave. She nodded back, her face serious. Director Peterson motioned for Greg to take a seat near the front. Next to him sat Commander Joe Martinez, head of station security. The commander's hand rested near his sidearm, a sign he wasn't taking any chances with these unknown visitors. "What do we know?" Greg asked quietly. "Not much," Joe replied. "The message said they're representatives of something called the Galactic Conclave, 17 different species who've apparently been watching us for centuries." Greg felt a chill. Watching us? For what purpose? That's what we're about to find out. The lights dimmed slightly, and a blue light began to flash near the docking bay doors. "Incoming ship has matched our orbit and is requesting permission to dock," announced the computer. Director Peterson stood up. At 58, she had been one of the youngest space program directors when the war broke out. Now her hair was gray, but her voice remained steady. "Grant permission," she said, "and may God help us all." The room fell silent. Greg could hear his own breathing, too loud in his ears. They had prepared for this moment in theory, but the reality of first contact with alien life made his scientific mind race with questions. The docking bay doors opened with a hiss. A tall figure stepped through, followed by 2 others. Greg stared, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The aliens looked somewhat like humans, but with important differences. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with skin that shimmered, with a slight purple tint. Their eyes were large and completely black without visible pupils. Instead of hair, they had what looked like thin, shiny filaments that moved slightly on their own. They wore simple white garments that seemed to glow from within. The lead alien stepped forward and bowed slightly. "I am Ambassador Zarntik of the Valuri," it said in perfect English with a musical quality to its voice. "On behalf of the Galactic Conclave, I extend greetings to humanity." Director Peterson stepped forward. "I am Director Linda Peterson of Orbital Platform Delta. We welcome you on behalf of Earth and all human colonies." The alien's mouth formed what might have been a smile. "We have been observing your world for some time. We regret that we arrive at such a difficult moment in your history." Greg couldn't help himself. He stood up. "You've been watching us? For how long?" The alien turned those black eyes toward him. "Since your species first began using tools, we have observed all sentient species in this sector of the galaxy." Director Peterson gestured to Greg. "This is Dr. Greg Winters, our lead xenobiologist." "A student of alien life," said Zarntik. How interesting that you theorized about us, without proof of our existence. That's what scientists do, said Greg. We look for answers before we have all the facts. Perhaps that is why your species has survived this long, said the alien, despite your best efforts to destroy yourselves. The room grew tense at these words. Commander Martinez stood up, his hand still near his weapon. What do you want from us? Martinez asked directly. The alien made a gesture with long, six-fingered hands. We wish to extend an invitation. The Galactic Conclave would like to establish formal relations with humanity. Why now? Asked Dr. Porter, speaking for the first time. If you've been watching us for so long, why contact us when we're at our weakest? The question hung in the air. Zarntik seemed to consider it carefully before answering. Your species is truly remarkable, the alien finally said, looking directly at Greg. You stand at the precipice of extinction, yet the Conclave fears you more than any species we have encountered. The statement stunned everyone in the room. Greg looked around and saw the same confusion on every human face. Fear us? Greg asked. We're barely surviving. Our population is less than 500,000. How could we possibly be a threat to 17 advanced species? Zarntik made a sound like gentle wind chimes, which Greg realized must be laughter. That is precisely what makes you so fascinating, Dr. Winters. No other sentient species has evolved your unique trait. What trait is that? Asked Director Peterson. The ability to thrive on violence and conflict, said Zarntik. All other known sentient species evolved cooperation as their primary survival strategy. Violence is rare among us, but humans, the alien gestured around the room. Humans developed both cooperation and competition in equal measure. That makes us dangerous? Asked Commander Martinez, sounding almost proud. Unpredictably so, replied Zarntik. You build magnificent works of art while developing weapons that can destroy your own planet. You sacrifice yourselves for strangers while waging war on your neighbors. No other species contains such contradictions. Greg suddenly understood. This isn't just a diplomatic visit, is it? You're here to assess us. The alien's filaments rippled in what might have been approval. Perceptive, Dr. Winters. Yes, the Conclave needs to determine if humanity deserves salvation or containment. Containment? Commander Martinez stepped forward. Are you threatening us? Not at all, said Zarntik calmly. We do not wish harm to any sentient species, but the galaxy is a delicate ecosystem. If humans were to recover and spread among the stars with your current nature intact. The alien paused. The consequences could be significant. Director Peterson's voice was cold when she spoke again. So we're being judged. You have always been judged, said Zarntik. As have all species, but now you have reached a turning point. Your future, extinction, containment, or expansion, hangs in the balance. Greg felt a weight settle on his shoulders. In studying potential alien life, he had never considered that humanity itself might be the most peculiar species in the galaxy. Endangered yet feared, dying yet dangerous. How long do we have? Greg asked. To prove ourselves worthy? Zarntik turned those black eyes toward him again. The assessment begins now, Dr. Winters, and you, I believe, will play a crucial role in it. As Greg looked into those alien eyes, he realized that humanity's greatest challenge had just begun. 3 months had passed since the aliens first arrived at Orbital Platform Delta. Greg Winters and Dr. Allison Porter stood in the shuttle bay, waiting to board the small ship that would take them to the glass archives. The massive alien vessel orbited Jupiter, far enough from Earth to make the humans nervous. Are you ready for this? Allison asked. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, the way she always wore it when she was stressed. Greg checked his supply pack one more time. As ready as I'll ever be. First humans to visit an alien library ship. Not bad for a species on the edge of extinction. Commander Martinez approached them, his uniform crisp despite the early hour. Remember your mission. Learn everything you can about the Conclave, their technology, and especially what they know about us. But be careful what you share. Greg nodded. The military and what remained of Earth's government still didn't fully trust the aliens' intentions. Greg didn't blame them. The idea that humanity was being judged still bothered him deeply. The shuttle ride took 6 hours. When they finally docked with the glass archives, Greg's breath caught in his throat. Through the viewport he could see that the alien ship was enormous, at least 5 miles long and shaped like a giant teardrop. Its outer hull was transparent in some places, opaque in others, shifting and changing as they watched. Ambassador Zarntik met them at the docking port. "Welcome to the repository of galactic knowledge," the alien said. "We have someone here who is eager to meet you." They followed Zarntik through curved hallways that seemed to be made of some kind of living crystal. The walls pulsed with soft light, and Greg noticed that the temperature and air composition adjusted automatically as they walked. "This ship is incredible," said Allison, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. "The material of these walls, it's responding to our presence, isn't it?" "Yes," said Zarntik. "The archives are partially biological. The ship grows and adapts as knowledge is added." They entered a large circular room with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside with perfect clarity. In the center of the room stood a human woman. Greg stopped in surprise. The woman appeared to be in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and tired eyes. She wore simple clothes that looked like a mix of human and alien design. "Hello," she said, her voice slightly rough as if she hadn't spoken English in a long time. "My name is Kate Miller. I've been waiting a long time to meet more of my kind." Greg stepped forward. "You're human? How is that possible?" The woman smiled sadly. "I was taken from Earth 50 years ago. A research expedition. At the time, I was angry, but now..." She gestured around her. "I've had the privilege of seeing the galaxy through alien eyes, and more importantly, of seeing humanity through alien eyes." Zarntik made a small gesture. "Librarian Kate has been invaluable to us. She has helped contextualize human history and behavior in ways our scientists could not." "Librarian?" asked Allison. "I'm the human curator for the archives," Kate explained. "I've been studying the Conclave's records on humanity. Would you like to see?" Greg and Allison exchanged glances. This was exactly what they had come for. Kate led them to a section of the room where the walls became screens, displaying images and text that shifted as they approached. "They've been watching us since the Bronze Age," Kate explained, waving, her hand at the displays. The screens responded, showing ancient cities, battles, and ceremonies. They've cataloged every war, every genocide, but also every act of self-sacrifice and heroism. Greg watched in amazement as human history flowed across the screens. Egyptian pharaohs, Roman legions, medieval castles, Industrial Revolution factories, modern cities, and finally the devastation of the last war. A tall, insect-like alien entered the room. It moved with careful precision, its multiple limbs perfectly coordinated. "This is Scholar Vex," said Kate. "He's the Conclave's senior researcher on humanity." "Greetings," said the alien in a clicking voice that somehow formed English words. "Your visit is an important opportunity for mutual understanding." Greg nodded, respectfully. "We're eager to learn why the Conclave views humanity as such a paradox." Scholar Vex moved to the displays and changed them with a wave of a thin limb. New images appeared, side-by-side comparisons of human achievements and atrocities. "Every other species evolved past violence as they developed technology," Vex explained. "The Risari abandoned warfare after inventing farming. The Kolathi haven't had a violent conflict in 50,000 years. The screens showed peaceful alien civilizations, building wonders without conflict. But humans..." The display changed to show atomic bomb tests alongside moon landings. "You created ever more sophisticated ways to kill each other alongside your greatest achievements." Allison frowned. "You make it sound like we're monsters." "Not monsters," said Kate, touching Allison's arm gently. "Just different. The Conclave. Species can't understand how the same people who write poetry and save strangers from burning buildings can also drop bombs on cities." Greg watched the contrasting images: hospitals and concentration camps, aid workers and soldiers, peace marches and battle charges. Something became clear to him. "It's not a contradiction," he said suddenly. "It's who we are. We contain multitudes." He remembered the line from Walt Whitman, a poet he'd studied before the war. Scholar Vex tilted his head. "Explain." "Our capacity for violence and our capacity for compassion come from the same place," Greg said. "We understand suffering because we can cause it. We value life because we know how easily it can be taken." Kate nodded, a look of pride on her face. "That's what I've been trying to explain to them for decades. But this duality makes your species unpredictable," said Zarntik, who had been listening quietly, "and potentially dangerous to the galactic peace." "Is that why we're being judged?" asked Allison. "Because we might disturb your perfect harmony?" Kate's expression grew serious. "The Conclave's governing council is split on humanity's fate. Some believe we should be helped to recover. Others think we should be permanently quarantined in our home system." Greg felt a chill. "Quarantined? Forever?" "For the safety of the galaxy," said Scholar Vex. "Though I personally advocate for integration. Your perspective is valuable, if managed properly." Greg looked back at the displays showing humanity's history. For the first time, he saw his species through alien eyes. Beautiful, terrifying, creative, destructive. A walking contradiction that had somehow survived against all odds. "We're not just what you see in these records," Greg said firmly. "We're also what we could become." "That," said Zarntik, "is precisely what the Conclave is afraid of." As Greg and Allison continued to explore the archives with Kate, they realized the magnitude of what they faced. They weren't just fighting for the survival of the remaining humans. They were fighting for humanity's place among the stars, and the aliens would need convincing that humans deserved that place. Back on orbital platform Delta, Greg and Allison worked with a small team of Conclave scientists. Weeks had passed since their visit to the glass archives. Kate Miller had returned with them to help bridge the gap between humans and aliens. The goal was to find ways to show the value of humanity to the galactic community. Greg sat in the lab, looking at brain scans that compared human and alien neural patterns. The differences were striking. Human brains showed more connections between the emotional and rational centers. Conclave species had cleaner, more separated systems. "No wonder they think we're confusing," Greg muttered. Commander Martinez entered, the lab with two station engineers, Sam Reeves and Diana Franklin. They looked serious. "We have a situation," Martinez said. "A Conclave colony ship just entered our solar system. They're reporting major system failures." Greg stood up quickly. "What kind of failures?" "Life support is damaged. Navigation is failing. Their automated systems can't handle the cascade failures." Kate looked up from her workstation. "How many people on board?" "Over 3,000 colonists, mostly in cryosleep," Martinez said. "Many of them are children. The Valuri were relocating families to a new settlement." Allison joined them. "Where's the Conclave response team?" "That's the problem," Martinez said. "The nearest Conclave rescue vessel is 3 days away. By then, it will be too late." Greg looked at the alien scientists in the room. They seemed frozen, uncertain. "Can't you help your own people?" Greg asked. Zarntik, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "The situation is difficult. The ship's radiation levels are too high for our species to survive exposure, and the emergency requires creative solutions that our people are not trained for." Greg realized what Zarntik was saying. The Conclave species were so specialized and safety-focused that they couldn't handle chaotic emergency situations. Their societies had been peaceful for so long that they'd lost the ability to improvise in a crisis. "We'll go," Greg said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "Humans can handle higher radiation levels than your species," Greg continued. "And we're good at improvising in emergencies. It's what helped us survive on Earth for so long, even through disasters." Martinez nodded slowly. "We could put together a rescue team." "It would be extremely dangerous," Zarntik warned. "Even for humans, the radiation exposure would cause damage, but not immediately fatal, right?" asked Sam, the engineer. He was young, barely 30, with an eager expression. We could survive long enough to make repairs. Diana, the other engineer, was already calculating on her tablet. If we rotate team members and use our radiation suits, we might be able to limit exposure to survivable levels. I'm going too, said Allison firmly. You'll need a physicist to understand their drive systems. Greg felt a surge of pride. This was humanity at its best, diving into danger to save others, even aliens they barely knew. Within 2 hours, they had assembled a rescue team and prepared a shuttle. Greg, Allison, Joe Martinez, Sam, Diana, and 3 other station specialists with engineering backgrounds. They carried tools, radiation medication, and portable shielding. As they prepared to board the shuttle, Zarntik approached Greg. This action is not required of you, the alien said. The Conclave would understand if humans chose not to risk themselves for our people. Greg secured his equipment bag. Maybe that's the difference you need to understand about us. We don't help only when it's required. We help because we can. The journey to the damaged colony ship took 4 hours. As they approached, Greg could see the problem immediately. A massive section of the hull had been damaged, likely by a micrometeorite impact. The ship's systems were trying to compensate, but failing. Their shuttle docked with the emergency airlock. The Conclave ship's captain, a tall Valuri named Elson, met them. His face filaments were twitching with stress. The main reactor is overheating, he said without greeting. The coolant systems are failing and radiation is leaking into the lower decks. Most of my crew has retreated to the shielded areas, but someone needs to manually override the system. Martinez took charge immediately. We'll split into teams. Sam and Diana assess the reactor situation. Allison check the navigation and life support. Greg and I will help with the colonists. The rest of you repair the hull breach. The teams moved quickly through the ship. The Conclave vessel was beautiful, with sweeping organic architecture, but now emergency lights flashed everywhere, and warning sounds echoed through the corridors. Greg and Martinez followed Captain Elson to the cryo chamber where most of the colonists slept. The radiation levels were already rising here. The children are most vulnerable, Elson said, indicating rows of smaller cryopods. If the radiation reaches these chambers, they will suffer permanent damage. We need to move them, Martinez said. Is there a more shielded area? The upper observation deck has additional protection, Elson replied. But moving 3,000 pods is impossible. Greg studied the ship schematics on a nearby screen. We don't need to move the pods. We need to redirect the radiation. He pointed to a system of cooling ducts. These run throughout the ship. If we can reconfigure them to channel the radiation away from the cryo chambers. Meanwhile, Sam and Diana had reached the reactor room. The radiation levels were dangerous here, their meters beeping constantly. This is bad, Sam said, examining the reactor controls. The cooling system is completely offline and the automated repair systems can't function in this radiation. Diana studied the emergency manual. We need to manually vent the excess heat through the external ports. That would require going into the main reactor chamber, Sam said. The radiation there is lethal. Diana looked grim. Not immediately. Lethal. Someone could survive long enough to make the adjustments. They stared at each other, both understanding what this meant. In another part of the ship, Allison worked frantically to restore the navigation systems. The Conclave ship was drifting, dangerously close to Jupiter's gravitational pull. If they didn't regain control soon, the ship would be pulled into the gas giant. The situation grew more desperate by the hour. The radiation levels continued to rise. Systems failed one after another. But the humans worked relentlessly, taking risks that shocked the Conclave crew. Sam entered the reactor chamber despite the lethal radiation, manually opening the cooling vents before collapsing. Diana dragged him out, her own skin already showing radiation burns. Greg and Martinez moved shielding panels to protect the children's cryo chambers, exposing themselves to dangerous levels of radiation in the process. Allison worked without breaks, her hands bleeding from where she'd torn away a melted control panel to reach the wiring beneath. After 16 grueling hours, they succeeded. The reactor stabilized. The radiation levels began to drop. The ship's course corrected away from Jupiter, but the victory came at a cost. Sam lay unconscious in the medical bay, his radiation exposure far beyond safe levels. The others all showed signs of radiation sickness. As they returned to their shuttle, exhausted and injured, Captain Elson and Zarntik watched them with new understanding. "You fight because you know what it means to lose," Zarntik said quietly to Greg as medical teams treated the injured humans. "The rest of us achieved peace by forgetting." Greg, too tired to stand, simply nodded. Perhaps now the Conclave would begin to understand that humanity's greatest weakness, their capacity for violence, was inextricably linked to their greatest strength, their willingness to risk everything to protect others. 6 months had passed since the daring rescue of the Conclave colony ship. The story of human bravery had spread throughout the 17 species. Sam Reeves had survived his radiation exposure, though he remained weak and needed regular medical treatments. The humans were no longer viewed with just fear and suspicion. Now there was respect mixed with the caution. Greg sat in a conference room on orbital platform Delta, listening to Allison explain human physics concepts to a group of Valuri scientists. The cooperation between humans and the Conclave had grown, stronger each month. Humans were teaching the aliens about adaptation and improvisation, while the Conclave shared their advanced technology. The door slid open, and Kate Miller entered with Zarntik and another alien Greg didn't recognize. This new alien was tall and gray-skinned, with 4 arms and a face that reminded Greg of an elephant, complete with a short trunk. "Dr. Winters," said Zarntik. "This is High Counselor Imora of the Conclave Council. He has traveled from the Central Worlds to speak with the human leadership." Greg stood quickly. The High Counselor was the most important alien to ever visit Earth orbit. "It's an honor," he said. "Should I call Director Peterson and Commander Martinez?" "They are already being notified," said Zarntik. "The matter is urgent." Something in the alien's tone made Greg worry. "What's happened?" Before Zarntik could answer, the room's main screen activated. A message from the communications center appeared. "Emergency council session beginning. All senior staff report immediately." Minutes later, Greg found himself in the station's largest meeting room. Director Peterson, Commander Martinez, Allison, and other station leaders had gathered. Kate sat next to Greg, looking concerned. On the large view screen at the front of the room, a recording played. The footage showed a distant space station. It orbited a small moon, with a blue-green planet visible beyond. The station appeared peaceful for a moment, then a fleet of unfamiliar ships appeared. Without warning or communication, the ships opened fire. The station's defenses responded. Weakly, too late. Within minutes, the station was destroyed, pieces of it drifting into space. The room fell silent as the recording ended. High Counselor Imora stepped forward. "This footage was captured by a probe in the Sentinel sector at the edge of Conclave space," he said. His voice was deeper than Zarntik's, with a rumbling quality. "The attacking species call themselves the Vorax. We encountered them once before, centuries ago, but deemed them primitive and non-spacefaring. They've clearly advanced since then," said Commander Martinez. "Rapidly so," agreed Imora. "They have now destroyed 3 outposts. Our scouts report they have built a large armada and appear to be expanding aggressively." "So you're at war," said Director Peterson. The High Counselor's trunk curled in what seemed to be discomfort. "The Conclave has not faced a true war in over 5,000 years. We have defense systems, but they are automated and limited. None of our species remembers how to fight." Greg suddenly understood why the High Counselor had come personally. "You need our help." "Yes," said Imora simply. "We need humans to teach us how to defend ourselves." The room erupted in discussion. Some people saw this as an opportunity for humanity to secure its place in the Conclave. Others worried about humans falling back into their violent past. Commander Martinez stood up. "This is the perfect role for humanity. We become the defenders of the Conclave. They provide the technology. We provide the strategic thinking." Allison shook her head. "I'm not comfortable with this. We nearly destroyed ourselves with warfare. Do we really want to become the galaxy's soldiers?" The debate continued for hours. Greg listened carefully to all sides. Finally, he spoke up. What if we take a middle position? We provide tactical guidance and training, but we don't fight your wars for you. We teach the conclave species how to defend themselves. High Counselor Imura considered this. That would be acceptable, but time is short. Our intelligence suggests the Vorax fleet will reach the core conclave systems within 6 months. We'll form a human advisory team immediately, said Director Peterson. Commander Martinez will lead it. As the meeting broke up, Kate pulled Greg aside. Her expression was troubled. I need to show you something, she said quietly. In private. Greg followed her to her quarters. Since returning from the glass archives, Kate had been given a small room on the station. It was sparsely decorated except for a terminal connected to the archives database. I've been doing research, Kate said, activating the terminal. Looking deeper into the conclave records about the Vorax. What did you find? Greg asked. Kate brought up a series of records, translation flowing across the screen. The Vorax were once peaceful. Their society was artistic and communal. Then about 300 years ago, they suddenly became aggressive and territorial. Species change, said Greg. Look at humanity's own history. Not like this, Kate insisted. The change was too sudden, and I found these. She showed him another set of records, these heavily redacted. Records of conclave ships visiting the Vorax homeworld just before the change. Greg's eyes widened as he understood. You think the conclave did something to them? Made them aggressive? Kate nodded, grimly. I think a faction within the conclave believed that maintaining a distant threat would prevent complacency, keep their defense systems funded and operational. And now that distant threat has grown too powerful to control, Greg said, the piece is falling into place. Exactly, said Kate. The conclave's peace wasn't just built on evolution and cooperation. It was partially built on outsourcing violence to carefully managed threats that now have spiraled out of control. Greg ran a hand through his hair. Have you told anyone else about this? Just you. I don't know who to trust in the conclave. Hierarchy. Greg thought about the implications. If this was true, the conclave wasn't as peaceful as they claimed. They had just hidden their capacity for manipulation and indirect violence behind proxies. We need to be careful with this information, Greg said. If we reveal it now, it could destroy the alliance before it begins. But we also can't ignore it. What do we do? Kate asked. Greg thought about the children on the colony ship they had saved. The ordinary conclave citizens weren't responsible for their leaders' actions. They deserved protection. For now, we help them prepare for the Vorax attack, he decided. But we also quietly investigate further, find out who was behind this and make sure they're held accountable when the crisis is over. Kate nodded in agreement. As they left her quarters, Greg wondered if humanity was making a mistake by getting involved in a conflict that wasn't truly their own. But then he remembered Sam Reeves, willing to sacrifice himself to save alien children. Perhaps that willingness to help others, even at great risk, was exactly why the galaxy needed humans after all. The day of confrontation arrived more quickly than anyone expected. The Vorax fleet had adapted and accelerated their advance toward the core conclave systems. Greg stood on the bridge of the Galactic Conclave defense vessel Harmony, watching the tactical display. What had once been science vessels were now transformed into defensive platforms under human guidance. Commander Martinez had done remarkable work in the past months. With help from Greg, Allison, and other human specialists, they had trained a volunteer force from various conclave species. The aliens had been eager students, but Greg noticed their deep discomfort with the concepts of tactical warfare. The Vorax fleet will reach our position in 3 hours, reported a Valuri officer. His voice was steady, but his filaments trembled slightly. Martinez nodded. All ships maintain formation. Remember your training. The defensive plan was solid. They had positioned their ships to protect the most populated conclave worlds. The retrofitted vessels carried powerful shields and non-lethal weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. The Conclave had insisted on this approach, unwilling to completely abandon their peaceful principles even in the face of aggression. Allison approached Greg, her face tense. "I've been reviewing Kate's findings. The evidence is clear now. A secret faction within the Conclave Security Council did manipulate the Vorax using chemical agents to alter their brain chemistry and make them more aggressive." "Does Zarntik know?" Greg asked quietly. "No. According to the records, only the highest levels of leadership were aware. Most Conclave citizens, even most officials, had no idea." Greg sighed. The moral complexity of the situation weighed on him. "Let's focus on surviving today. We can deal with accountability tomorrow." As the Vorax fleet appeared on long-range sensors, High Counselor Emora entered the bridge. He had insisted on being present for the confrontation despite the danger. "The moment of truth approaches," he said solemnly. "Are your people ready?" "Commander Martinez?" "As ready as we can be," Martinez replied. "But I'm concerned about your crews. In training simulations, they hesitated at critical moments. It is difficult to overcome eons of evolutionary programming against violence," Emora admitted. "But they understand what is at stake." The next hours passed in tense preparation. Greg helped coordinate communications between the human advisors spread throughout the Conclave fleet. Allison worked with the engineering teams, ensuring the defensive systems were optimized. When the Vorax fleet finally appeared, Greg was struck by the alien design of their ships. They were angular and predatory, so different from the organic curves of Conclave vessels. Without warning or communication, the Vorax opened fire. The battle began in earnest. The Conclave ships moved into defensive positions, their shields absorbing the first wave of attacks. They returned fire with the disabling weapons, successfully neutralizing several smaller Vorax vessels. For a moment, Greg felt hope. The plan was working. The defense was holding. Then everything changed. A large Vorax cruiser broke through the defensive line, heading directly for a populated Conclave world. Two Conclave ships moved to intercept, weapons charged and ready. But they didn't fire. "What are they doing?" Martinez shouted over the communications link. "They need to stop that cruiser now." Greg watched in horror as the Conclave crews froze. Despite all their training, when faced with the moment of attack, their evolutionary programming against violence prevented them from firing, even as their own ships were destroyed. Similar reports came in from across the fleet. The Conclave volunteers could operate defensive systems but balked at offensive actions, even when necessary to protect others. "We're losing," Allison said quietly beside Greg. "They can't do it. They can't bring themselves to attack, even to save themselves." Greg's mind raced. They needed a solution. Quickly. He turned to Emora. "What if humans could make the decisions the Conclave cannot?" "Explain," the High Counselor said. "Direct neural interfaces between human tactical commanders and Conclave. Weapon systems. We could make the violent decisions your people cannot, bearing the psychological burden while your people operate the ships." Emora considered for only a moment before nodding. "Can it be done quickly?" Allison stepped forward. "The Conclave already has neural interface technology for medical purposes. We could repurpose it. It wouldn't be perfect, but it might work." "Do it," ordered Emora. What followed was a desperate race against time. While the remaining Conclave ships maintained defensive positions, Allison and a team of engineers worked to modify the neural interface systems. Human volunteers, including Martinez and several of his tactical officers, prepared to connect with the Conclave weapons. Greg helped coordinate the effort, moving between ships to explain the plan. The Conclave crews were relieved to have the burden of offensive decisions taken from them. 3 hours later, the modified interfaces were ready. Martinez was the first to connect, his consciousness linking with the weapon systems of the Harmony. The sensation was overwhelming at first. He could feel the ship as if it were an extension of his body. When the next wave of Vorax ships attacked, the response was immediate. Under human guidance, the Conclave vessels fought with precision and determination. They targeted propulsion and weapon systems, disabling rather than destroying when possible. but no longer hesitating when decisive action was needed. The tide of battle slowly turned. The Vorax, facing unexpected resistance, began to pull back. Their advance halted, then reversed, but the victory came at a cost. The human operators experienced profound psychological trauma from their direct connection to the violence. Greg watched Martinez after he disconnected from the interface, seeing the man's hands shake uncontrollably. "It's like I destroyed those ships with my bare hands," Martinez whispered. "I felt everything." "You saved countless lives," Greg reminded him. "At what cost to ourselves?" Martinez asked. "This isn't sustainable, Greg. We can't become the violent centers for an entire galactic civilization." In the days following the battle, as both humans and Conclave members rebuilt and recovered, Greg met with High Counselor Imora. Kate joined them, bringing her evidence about the Vorax manipulation. To Greg's surprise, Imora did not deny the allegations. "What you discovered is true," the High Counselor admitted. "A terrible decision made by my predecessors, one that we are now paying for. The Vorax were altered to maintain a distant threat, to prevent our civilization from growing complacent. It was wrong, and I will ensure those responsible face justice." "And humanity's role going forward?" Greg asked. Imora's four hands made a complex gesture. "The Conclave Council has reached a decision. We formally recognize humanity's unique evolutionary position in the galaxy, a species capable of both great violence and great compassion, of both destruction and self-sacrifice." Greg waited as the High Counselor continued. "You are both the most endangered species we have encountered and the most dangerous," Imora said. "And that is precisely why the galaxy needs you. You remember what the rest of us have forgotten, that creation and destruction are two sides of the same coin." In the months that followed, humanity took a special place in the Conclave, not merely as members but as guardians. Their population slowly recovering with Conclave medical help, humans became the conscience of the galactic community. They walked a knife's edge between their capacity for violence and their capacity for love, teaching the other species what they had lost in their pursuit of perfect peace. Greg stood on the observation deck of Orbital Platform Delta, watching as Earth's atmosphere showed the first signs of healing. Beside him, Allison and Kate looked down at their home planet. "We are endangered because we are deadly," Greg said quietly. "And we are deadly because we know what it means to be endangered. That's not a contradiction. It's who we are." As they watched, a new generation of humans trained alongside Conclave apprentices in the station below. Together, they were building something new, a civilization that remembered that the cost of peace is eternal vigilance, and that those who forget how to fight may lose everything they built.